Board for our first look at the reefs of Bazaruto. These men are all experts in their own field of underwater activity, whether it be filming, marine biology, conchology, or just spearfishing. One of those bright tingling mornings too, when it feels good to be alive. Did I say alive? Looks as if the effort was too much for him. Speculation is interminable on these trips, and signs of underwater activity are eagerly looked for. Breakfast time in the sea. Swift shoals of bonito trap carapau near the surface. The excited fish strike at any moving object in the frenzy of the chase, and the angler is quick to take advantage of the situation. Tropical bonito like these are heavy for their species, some weighing as much as 18 pounds. The sea appears to boil, the fish are so thickly massed, and the couple our anglers take will certainly not be missed. A friendly porpoise comes up to satisfy his curiosity. And now the long-awaited moment draws nearer, as the diver's ready for action over the coral seabed. A silent, colorful world of beauty. In this tranquil atmosphere, it is hard to realize that this is a world of cannibalism, of eat and be eaten, as we have just witnessed with the bonito breakfasting on the defenseless carapau. But that is nature's way, and one wonders whether fish appreciate beauty of form and color. Surgeonfish are so named because each one has two scalpel-like spines on its tail. Well named, I think, are the Moorish idols, reminiscent of dancing girls. A blue surgeon, surely an army surgeon in that uniform. And a parrotfish who uses its parrot beak for the crunching of coral containing live organisms called polyps. Blue mullet, on which so many of the game fish feed, glow like neon signs. Idols idling. No fair lady was ever more beautifully clad than some of these tropical fish. They seem to know it too, like the emperor angelfish, here promenading under a coral veranda. All that is needed to start a coral bank such as this is a small reef, however tiny, from which the coral colonies will multiply and extend until vast areas of the seabed are covered. A beautiful emperor butterfly fish in resplendent dress. I must say I think this boxfish would have been called the helicopter fish had helicopters been invented before it was named. However, I have no better suggestion for naming butterfly fishes, of which species there are many varieties. A closer look at marine land reveals the most astonishing growths, like this red petticoat plant, though what its purpose in life is I couldn't hazard a guess. Coral is as much a building as any skyscraper, and the intricate details in this brain coral is faithfully copied by each successive generation of coral polyps. In complete contrast of structure is the lace coral, which hides a large multi-legged starfish. The trigger that gives the triggerfish its name is a spike located just behind the top of the head. The graceful jellyfish has no spikes for protection, but it can sure sting. It swims, as you see, in a series of undulations. Fatfish frequent deeper waters outside the barrier reefs. Shooting a wary gamefish is not as easy as it appears, but this pompano falls victim to an accurate spear. A few minutes earlier, the pompano was feeding on blue mullet, as the contents of his stomach revealed on inspection. Ever see a hooked fish before? A member of our Bantu crew had this one on his line. There is never a dull moment in this game. Whether at work or at play, there is always that element of challenge that is the spice of life. What a thrilling sight it is to see such concentrated shoals of majestic caranx, more commonly known as kingfish. They average some 4 feet in length. Underneath them, a predatory grouper of about 150 pounds hangs about in the hope of getting a free meal. Another species of caranx is a jabada. They seem quite at ease, swimming in company with the diver. I was asked to get one of these caranx fulvoputatus as a specimen for examining on board the Pascoa, but I nearly didn't land him. For a grouper seized the fish as soon as its movement was hampered by the spear, As it fought to take the fish to its lair, a large shark, attracted by the commotion, whizzed in and hit the grouper at speed. There was one terrific jerk, then the line went slack. During the ensuing confusion, I managed to retrieve the mangled fish. How lucky can one be? Turtle on the wing, or is it on the flipper? The ponderous, slow-moving turtle would be prey to all kinds of predators if it hadn't that hard, horny shell for protection. The turtle is actually a sort of living tank. We could, of course, have shot a specimen, but they seem such harmless old boys that no one had the heart to kill one, much to the annoyance of the African boat's crew. It would to them be a welcome change from the normal, rather monotonous fish diet. Female turtles lay their eggs just beneath the surface of the sandy beaches on the islands hereabouts, where they are finally hatched by the heat of the sun. We were fortunate to get a chance to study one without harming it when a youngster was spotted asleep under a rock, and Lionel sneaked up and rudely hauled it out of bed before it woke up. We found on examination that this species are a bit different from Cape turtles in markings, etc. One thing they have in common, though, is the tendency to try and snap one's fingers off. The turtle is a veritable amateur at finger snapping when it comes to the vicious moray eel, a true villain if ever there was one. Many a diver has been savagely bitten by these dangerous creatures with their poisonous teeth. Donald takes a flashlight photo of one before Cecil kills it, as we were afraid to leave it free with divers operating in the area. Note underneath him a parrotfish he has regurgitated. The moray anchors itself in holes by hooking its tail around rocky projections, and it never lets go until dead. Having been shot through the head, this one's reflexes are all that remain active, yet one is well advised not to take chances with the evil-looking mouth. We spent quite some time dissecting this leopard eel. With the moray out of the way, the hunt for marine specimens continues, with the hope that rare or even new species of shells or crustacean might be found. So the reefs slowly give up their secrets and treasures, as more and more varied specimens arrive on board the Pascoa. Gems of the ocean bed on an unfamiliar background. The cowrie must surely rank among the most beautiful of shells. Not so beautiful, perhaps, but also attractive is the turban shell. As I thought, the lure of crayfish mayonnaise evidently was too overpowering for our boys to pass up the succulent crustacean. Lucky turtle, he is still free to dive. On this occasion, Bert de Vries in the big hat provides bread and cheese for the divers, but the following day was to be crayfish and carrancs à la Portuguese. The African crew were better off than the divers, with their bowl of mealie pap, which they dip into tasty fish gravy. The reefs are so far off base that an early start is essential to arrive back in daylight. And so the curtain falls on the first part of our diving exploits in the Bay of Bazaruto. Pascoa, by comparison, is a veritable liner, so we decided among ourselves, due to the shortage of food, that we would make use of our spear guns to help stock up the islanders' larders with fish, to repay the many kindnesses shown by them to us. The trip, therefore, became a sort of combined operations, with fishing well to the fore. Readying their spear guns are Lionel, Arthur, John, and Derek. Out over the reefs, we encountered this shark-like creature, a curiosity with those abnormally large wings. We were unable to identify it from available reference books. It was promising to see so many prodigal sons about, for they are fed on by most big game fish, which our hunters were after. What would the islanders think of our method of fishing? I know our Bantu crew were always delighted for us to get the fish, but enter the water they would not. Due, they told us, to the evil spirits that dwell beneath the waves. But the shark, I feel uncharitably, is one of the evil spirits. This type of evil spirit will often invite itself to dine on a diver's shot fish. Fortunately, this one was too cautious to attempt it, and the fish was secured for the islanders. Some of the others had been equally successful, and the total poundage boated was a useful contribution. One of the most impressive of sights are these majestic pelagic fish, the carrancs, as they range the oceans in their teeming thousands. That they are migratory fish we know, but where they come from and where they go is a mystery as deep as the ocean. Our friendly enemy, the grouper, as usual, hangs about in the hope of nabbing one of our fish. If only he knew what happened to the last one that tried it. He weighs about 100 pounds. Away over the sandy seabed, an 8-foot shark goes for a leisurely cruise. time to make for the surface. This could come under the heading of horseplay, but it was actually done to emphasize the curious rock formation existing off Bazaruta Point. Nervous without reason was this eagle ray, as no one would possibly want to harm it. Sunlight reflecting off iridescent scales makes this rainbow king glow like a neon sign. The sea all around us, which is generally accepted as plain salt water, is in reality a sort of thin soup, in that it is filled with life-giving microorganisms, such as plankton, on which the life cycle of all underwater creatures is dependent for existence, from lowly sea cucumbers to giant whales, not forgetting the myriads of reef dwellers, the beautiful and the incongruous. This weird bat-shaped object is an electric ray, a real shocker. The most fashionable fish on the reef in his polka dot waistcoat, the emperor triggerfish. The meek and the ferocious, all thrown together in the uneasy struggle for life in the sea. A torpedo-shaped barracuda lifes through the water effortlessly, a worthy opponent, but a difficult target to hit. Only after it explodes into action does one realize the power latent in this streamlined fish. A tendency of most game fish is to attempt to snag one's line on the nearest reef. This is one of the hazards that makes spearfishing tricky. Fortunately, this barracuda reefed my line in fairly shallow water, and I was able to dive and clear it. Finally, it was boated. It weighed 34 pounds. The deckhand looks nervous. Perhaps he felt we were upsetting the sea spirit. One of the boys comes up with a pompano. The thick, rubbery lips of this gatterin may look clownish, but are strictly functional. They are used for sucking crabs out of the sandy seabed. The Bantu name hua hua for this fish has a romantic ring to it. The spearhead is of the free-falling or detachable kind. It is connected to the spear by a wire trace. The spear, in turn, is joined to the gun by 100 feet of heavy nylon line. Who said sharks don't sleep? Here is evidence enough that they do, in their natural habitat. Donald is intent on recording the event for posterity with a 35mm camera and flash bulb. These 12-foot potential man-eaters seem harmless enough as they share a cave in some 40 feet of water. This chap was so fast asleep, in fact, that I had to dangle a heavy spear on its back several times before it woke up and emerged. This was so we could film the brute out in the open. shallow water apparently is no deterrent to sharks. Meanwhile, divers reported having seen giant Carang signobles, the biggest species of all kingfish, feeding on blue mullet. Obviously, the thing is to make the most of any chance to bag one of these magnificent fish, and excitement rose as the hunt commenced. It's quite tricky getting within firing distance of these wary fish, as even our powerful guns have a limited range of some 12 to 15 feet, so that one must dive as noiselessly as possible. This powerful fighter put in several runs before I finally managed to get a hold of it. It's more than a bit foolish, really, to put a hand in the gills of such a big fish as I did, because they have extremely sharp gill rakers. And at that moment, the king was grinding up my knuckles, even through the glove I was wearing. I was relieved when the gaff took over and I got my mangled fingers back. On deck there was some jubilation among the Bantu crew, not only for the amount of food taken, but also in anticipation of a reward, which is usually forthcoming from the successful hunter of the heavier than usual catch. The king weighed 85 pounds. Carang signobilis is one of the gamest and most sought after of all game fish. In spite of having such a large bony head, this specimen will yield about 60 pounds of edible flesh, in addition to being a talking point for many months to come. Although there is the appearance of plenty, there was still insufficient fish to make a feast for the islanders, as there are so many of them. But for the time being, we had to leave the barrier reef, and accompanied by an escort of porpoises, headed for base on Margarook. It is strange that these mammals are so attracted by the movement of a boat, which they will follow or precede for miles. Porpoises have never, to my knowledge, taken hooked fish off a line or spear, so no one minds their presence at all. Another name for this type of barracuda is Spanish mackerel, a fierce predator. It is certainly well equipped to catch its prey. What big teeth you have, Grandma. Meanwhile, the islanders were hard at it trying to augment their own meager catches. Perhaps they had no faith in us as fishermen. Early next morning, we were out reconnoitering Grouper Channel, looking for the monsters. This at the express wish of the island chief, who, having first gratefully accepted our contribution of fish to his village, surprised us by appearing complete with some old diving equipment and a small gun, and offering to do his bit as a diver. He's the first and only Bantu we have met that skin dives. He waits his cue to drop in with the rest. He bagged a triggerfish with his very first shot. It seems he got the old equipment and diving know-how in exchange for pawpaws and goodwill. Meanwhile, the heavy guns were being loaded prior to the boys tangling with the garupa, a fish viewed with respect by any sensible skin diver. And then a moment of truth as the monster is shot. As the line screams out, the diver speeds to the surface before the fish can empty the reel, and the high-speed tow begins. When the cameraman finally caught up with the pair, the fight was almost over. Using no breathing apparatus, for this is not permitted by club rules, it is tough going getting to the surface in order to breathe. By this time, I was almost as limp as the fish. On realizing what was taking place, the boys couldn't wait to get in the swim. Excitement reached fever pitch as Ron Wilson let drive at this giant specimen, and the game was on with a vengeance. Chameleon fashion, it changes color out over the light sand. The greatest care must be exercised in handling these fish, and a diver can never relax or allow the line to loop around him, or he could be dragged down and drowned, or the fish could attack him. They have mouths large enough to grab a diver and drown him. More than one diver has in fact been drowned by a giant garupa. Just look at the size of this brute as he is brought to the boat. The crew were taxed to the limit in hauling this monster on board, and no wonder. The victor and the vanquished, or was it the other way around? There is naturally considerable excitement when a feat like this is accomplished. When yet another grouper is landed, this time on a reef, many willing hands are forthcoming to haul it onto the Pascoa. It certainly looks as if the islanders' lean period is over. These garupa feed largely on crustacean and can often be seen raising clouds of sand from the seabed by jetting water from their mouths in order to get at crabs buried there for protection. The hard horny gill plate is part of the fish's armor and ends in a short spike. It uses these gill plates to wedge itself in caves when hooked or shot. The throat is lined with a series of sharp, serrated gill rakers. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Like all fishermen, we very carefully record the weight of the one that didn't get away. This one weighed 154 pounds. Meanwhile, back at the reef, Why, for art thou brooding with mournful face, O Derrick? 'Twas but a fish that did escape thee. Arthur's fish tipped the scale at 268 pounds, a worthy feat. Meanwhile, back at the reef, the 304 pounds bronze grouper was a record and was the largest of the three landed. Cut into strips and dried, these three fish, totaling 726 pounds, would provide the islanders with food for a very long time to come. Naturally, our divers took a portion, which was prepared by our cook that night, and they were agreeably surprised to find it tasted rather like crayfish. To get these fish onto the beach, they had to be thrown back into the water, tied to ropes, and towed ashore, and this, it proved, attracted several sharks. With frenzied splashing and excited yells, this shark was beached. Our crew found it thrashing about in the shallows. On examination, it was found to be a harmless sand shark that had been attacked by another species of shark, which, from the appearance of the teeth marks on its body, was almost certainly a man-eater. It must have come into the shallows to avoid its attacker. Sand shark is something we would never dream of eating, but was considered fair game by the islanders, who finally took it away with them. Once more the island beaches are deserted as the day's activities subside. In the village, life continues in leisurely tempo, as it has for hundreds of years, as the Shangani prepare for the evening singing and feasting to give thanks for the bounty of the sea. Civilization has made little impact on these people, and they have a childlike simplicity that is refreshing. Here, remote on the island, we catch something of the spirit of their earthiness, and in our own way share the magic of this closeness to Mother Nature. As night approaches, we savor the quiet joy of this newfound peace as the day draws to a happy end.